So, I'll be showing you how to paint a Japanese snack packaging artwork. As you can see here, this is of Milky, and this is the very famous little Peko, which we are going to be painting today. So we're going to be using Winsor & Newton paints as well as some Holbein paints for this artwork. Not too many colors, some primary colors as you can see, along with burnt sienna and some black or neutral tint. So we're going to start off with Winsor Newton watercolors, as I mentioned. The first one here is Winsor Lemon or Lemon Yellow, Winsor Red as well as Permanent Alizarin Crimson, Phtalo Blue Green shade as well as Ultramarine Blue, and this is Burnt Sienna. Alright, we're going to start off with the skin tone. This is Jaune Brilliant 1 from Holbein. It's going to be a very diluted mix, and we're going to cover her whole face with it. So carefully go around her eyes. Make sure you don't go over the whites of her eyeballs. Careful around the hairline, as well as her cheeks. Now you want to tap in a bit more here and there wherever there's a bit more shadow, like around her ears and her chin. Now we're going to go and get some Winsor Red, just a really light tinge of it, and we're going to just dab into her cheeks. This is the wet on wet technique, so the cheeks are still wet from the Jaune Brilliant earlier, but probably about 80% dry. And then we're going to tap in a really diluted mix, but not too wet, of Winsor Red, and just let it spread. Oops, forgot the neck, so make sure you paint the neck in as well. Next, we're going to take Winsor Lemon, or Winsor Yellow actually, and paint this label at the side here. So there are two areas that are yellow, which is this label over here under the word Milky, as well as her shirt. So this is her left part of her shoulder, and then the middle part of her chest. So you don't want it to be too thick. The watercolor that we're using here is a bit light, it's very diluted, it's not too opaque, quite transparent. And then finally the right side of her shoulder. And that's it. That's all the lemon yellow that you need to use. Okay, we're gonna let that dry, and then now we're going to go ahead with Winsor Red. If you have any other bright red color, you can use that as well. Or you can mix a bit of your Alizarin Crimson together with maybe a vermilion or scarlet, just a hint of it, just to get it slightly brighter and a bit more warmer. Okay, so I am using a few brushes, as you can see. So for smaller areas, I'll probably use like a size 2 brush, and now I'm using a size 4 brush, a round brush. You can use any round brushes that you have. All the materials that I use for this tutorial will be found in the description box below. If you want a printable of this, which is probably where you came from, this printable is available on our website for free download. Just add it to cart, check out, and the download will appear for you in PDF form. Just go ahead and print it out on any watercolor paper that you have, preferably like a 200 or 300 GSM cellulose watercolor paper. I'm using 100% cellulose watercolor paper from Arto 300 GSM. Okay, so here I am moving to a smaller brush actually, so that I can get into all the little corners where the words individual alphabets are. So this is my actual speed. I'm actually pretty slow when I painted. In total, I probably took about 2 hours to paint this whole thing. So you don't rush, okay? Just take your own time as you paint this. I'm going to speed up in certain areas, but you can always pause and stop as you paint. So take your time. You can finish this over a course of a whole day, a few days, completely up to you. But I would suggest painting the reds all at once because you don't want them to be too patchy, and you want to make sure that you get the right consistency. Okay, so again, there's going to be some areas that's a bit lighter and darker, and that's fine because that's how the shadow of the packaging goes, because the packaging isn't flat, so it's filled with food, obviously, the snack, and it's a bit more three-dimensional, so the shadows and all that will make it a little more realistic. So this is just the first layer. We're just doing the highlight wash, and then later on we're going to add on shadows and midtones for the rest of the artwork. So here I am going over with an even smaller brush. This is a 5/0 brush. This is from Arto. You can use any other brand that you have. And then I'm going to go over again. This is a Rosemary 3/0. So slightly larger again because I'm trying to cover more area. So as I get around the corners, I make it slightly darker as well as around the words, just to make the words pop up a little more. And in between that edges. Okay, right now I'm going to mix a bit of Alizarin Crimson into the mix because I want it to be even deeper and darker around this area. Gently line the edges as well. Okay. Just be really careful and make sure that you go over the areas that are close to another painted area when they are completely dry. Otherwise, you risk actually having the colors bleed into it. Also be mindful about which areas that have colors in them. So there's also an image of this artwork that's been completed on the website. I want you to refer to it as much as possible when doing this painting. Always identify where the blues are, the yellows are, the reds are, so that you don't get confused or mix them up. Okay, so be very careful when you're lining. I'm using a very fine brush, as you can see, and then slowly coloring it in. You can also switch to a bigger brush when you're doing this. Sometimes I forget and just continue with a small brush for everything. But you need to work really fast, otherwise you'll find yourself going back and forth into the paint, and that's going to cause it to be a bit patchy because you don't match the colors properly. Okay, so touching up all the lines around the words, around the alphabets. It's actually really therapeutic doing this. If you need to fill up your time doing something during the weekday night or on weekends, this is really fun. And you can do this as many times as you want. You can always reprint this again and again. Okay, now we're going to add some shadows. I'm just going to go over with a darker hue of Alizarin Crimson as well as Winsor Red. Now we're just going to add some shadows around here. And on the left hand side, we're just going to paint in that entire area. So as I get into the corners and all, I tend to use the smaller brush because I really don't want to make the lines too thick and eat into the painted areas. And then go back with a thicker brush to just color it up. Because a bigger brush, has more bristles, which obviously will be able to hold more water in its belly. Okay, so just color in that little edge between her hair and the ribbon. And we're gonna add more shadows. Again, just more Alizarin Crimson, diluted with some water. As long as it's darker, try to swatch this on a clean piece of paper first before going straight onto the artwork so you can see how dark it is. If it's not dark enough, you can add more pigment. If it's too light, too dark, you can always add more water to it to dilute the color out. Okay. So in areas where you don't want the shadows to be too harsh, you can always go over with a wet brush on top of the painted areas and just soften the edges. So that way it creates more of a softer shadow rather than a harsh shadow. Another shadow on this side. So when you paint shadows on both sides of the packaging, it makes it look like the center portion of it is more rounded, which means it's more filled up, so it doesn't look too flat. Okay. I'm gonna add more shadows at the top here, so and also slightly above the left hand corner side. And then just going over the areas where the packet is sealed, like so. Touching up as I go along. A bit more shadows, as and where you see fit. You can always refer to the original artwork for reference on where the shadows are. I've actually taken creative liberty to adjust them according to what I think looks good. So feel free to make adjustments yourself. I'm also darkening the inner corners of the words again because I want them to really stand out. We're not going to color in areas that are supposed to be white, such as the milky word, as well as that little sweet looking shape at the top right corner, as well as the oval on the top left where the logo Fujiya is. Okay, right now we're going to take Winsor Red again, mix with a little Alizarin Crimson and color in her tongue. And then I will be lining her lips as well. Just do that with a really fine thin brush. I'm actually using a liner brush over here. This is a long short liner brush and it is a size 0. Alright, so now we're going to go and color in her hair with Burnt Sienna. This is Winsor Newton's Burnt Sienna. It's really beautiful. It is a reddish brown color. And we're going to color the center of her hair where it's browner, and then towards the edges of her hair on the top as well as her fringe, it is darker. So it's more of a burnt sienna, it's more of a burnt umber sepia color. So I just added some neutral tint to it. If you have black, you can use black. So I mixed that into the burnt sienna and I am just coloring in the edges of her bangs. And you want to make sure that the burnt sienna portion is still wet so that everything just melts in together or forms a gradient. If it's already dry, don't worry, go over with a damp brush and try to blend it out together. So I'm switching between a size 4, size 2, and then down to a size 0 again here. And then back to a size 0 again for this one. Just gently lining everything together and then blending it out. So at this point, the whole painting is slowly starting to come together. It can be very intimidating when you start a painting and you don't know where to start, where to end. So hopefully this tutorial really helps you gain some confidence when it comes to painting packaging. So you can always try this with a lot of different packaging that you want. Start from the lightest color and slowly move up to the darker colors. So I started off with like a skin tone and then yellow and then red and then finally now brown. Okay, so now we have her hair. Okay, I'm also going to touch up her bangs slightly. Just gonna blend in more of that sepia mixture that I've created with burnt sienna and neutral tint. And then just use a wet damp brush to just soften out the edges. I'm adding a little more here because I want it to really pop just like how the image in the packaging looks like. Okay, so now I'm gonna go over. So don't forget her hair at the corner here. That's also part of her hair. So I'm gonna make it purely just sepia, no brown, because it's perpetually in shadow. And since I already have brown and since I already have brown on my bristles, I'm just gonna continue lining different parts of her face that have brown as well, which is basically the entire little girl. Now I'm using a red color here right now to line the words. So just do it really slowly, use your fine brush. I'm using a size 50 over here. And now I've sped it up a little because it really did take a while. Just refer to the image if you want to see what it looks like close up. Over here on the logo, these are little petals, also in red. Now we're going to take Ultramarine Blue. You can mix a little neutral tint with it to make it a bit darker, or black. And then I'm going to line her eyes and her iris as well. Just be careful to see where the whites of her eyes are. So we are doing one eye here. And then we're going to move on to the next eye. Just be very careful when you're doing this. Now you can always turn the paper around as you're painting. The reason why I'm not doing it here, but I do it all the time, is because I'm recording the video and it's a bit strange to have the paper move up and down the screen. So I'm just holding it in one direction, just for your ease of viewing. But in real life, when I'm painting on my own, I tend to just move the sheet of paper around. And then paint on her lashes as well. Now, what else is blue? Her pinafore, as well as the ribbons on her hair. So just paint that in. Just be careful with her buttons. Don't miss out her pinafore that's above her chest as well. Okay, so now we're going to use a bigger brush, and I'm just going to mix a lighter hue of ultramarine, because according to the image it is a little brighter. So I've added a little more water to it. Just be careful when you get to the edges, color within the lines. This is just the highlight layer. We're going to create some dark areas and shadows later on by adding a bit more neutral tint or black to the ultramarine blue mixture. When you're done with the bow on the left, move on to the bow on the right. Just be really careful with her cheeks because you're touching her skin tone, so try not to bleed into it. Okay, here we're going to use the other shade of blue that's required. If you don't have this blue, you can use cerulean blue, you can use cobalt blue, whatever other blue that you have, even Prussian blue. So we're going to use Winsor blue here, which is a Phtalo green shade. And I'm just using a very fine brush. I'm doing this freehand, but you can always just draw on with pencil first so that you can ration out the space that you need to draw each alphabet. I would suggest that you actually look at the image and refer to the image instead of actually looking at this video, at this clip, and trying to paint it from scratch if you're planning to do it freehand, because you might make a mistake. To be honest, I actually skipped one or two characters, not that anybody would notice unless they were looking at it really closely and actually cross-referencing it to the original. So don't worry, you can always improvise as you go along. So you need a very stable hand for this. There were quite a bit of moments where I was holding in my breath. So this is a good chance to practice your breath work. Also, every now and then, try to get up from your chair, walk around, look up, because you might find yourself looking down a lot when painting this. Alright, here's just us doing the rest of the tiny characters at the top. These are just single stroke characters, pretty simple. And then here we're gonna do the capital F in cursive for the logo. So the brand, the manufacturer of this product is Fujiya. And then we're going to line the entire oval with black as well, or neutral tint. Made it a little too thick. Okay, now we're going to use White Gouache from Holbein. This is just the regular gouache, not the acrylic gouache. So we're going to write the words pickle here with White Gouache directly onto the dry surface. Make sure that your paint is thick so that the words stand out. Otherwise, it tends to become slightly transparent if it's not made thick enough. And then a little tiny R there for the registered trademark. And then we're going to take some brown here, some burnt sienna, mixed with a bit of neutral tint. And we are going to line the corrugated lines of the packaging. And this is where the packaging is sealed. So we're going to do it at the bottom as well as the top. Make sure you're stable. Try to do it in one clean stroke. If you can't, split it into two, that's fine. Just try not to have too many tiny strokes. We're using a liner brush here, so this is where liner brushes come in really handy when you're lining like long lines, cables, anything that requires going on and on for more than like 2 centimeters. Alright. Finally, we are going to take more of that white gouache and we are going to form little dots across, and there's also a bunch of Japanese words strung together on the top left hand corner here. So I'm slowly doing little dots. You can actually draw on with a pencil first if you're not confident of going straight on. And then finally just write on the characters with white gouache again. Just make sure it's really thick. You want to make sure that your white gouache is not too watery, but it's not too thick either. Okay? And the reason why we're using cellulose paper again is because cellulose paper, it's much easier to line thin lines and smoothly, because cotton tends to be a bit more textured. Cold pressed cotton tends to be a bit more textured. Now here we are going to use Finetech Gold. You can use any gold metallic paint that you have. And then we are just going to line the sweet shape over here. If you don't have gold, you can use probably just a yellow ochre color, and that's fine as well. We're just going to go around the edges. Make sure it's thick as well, similar to your white gouache earlier. Not too watery, otherwise it's going to be slightly transparent. So you want the color to be really opaque. And there you have it, your very own milky painting from scratch. Congratulations for getting this done. We're really proud of you, and thank you so much for watching this and trying this out. Happy painting!